Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. So today we're going to be looking at those YouTube transcripts and notes you sent over about false prophets.
Yeah,
And seems like something you're really interested in getting into.
yeah, it's a hot topic. And who isn't a little curious about how to spot those wolves in sheep's clothing, right?
Exactly.
What's fascinating to me is how this topic, could feel ancient, but it's so relevant today, especially with all these online personalities and influencers. It's
Hmm?
like history is repeating right in front of us.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And you've given us so much to dig into here. I think it's really interesting how these sources, even though they're from different times and different platforms,
Right.
all highlight the same things about false prophets and how to deal with them.
It's a pattern that just keeps coming up again and again throughout history.
Okay, so let's get into it. You're looking for some serious insight here and maybe a little protection from those who might not be who they seem.
Right.
So like starting with the basics, what actually makes a prophet false?
Well, the sources you sent actually give some pretty clear criteria,
Okay.
almost like red flags to look out for.
Okay, I like that.
The first one that really stood out to me was contradictions with established teachings.
Okay.
And we're not just talking about disagreeing on like minor details here. This is about teachings that totally clash with the core principles of, let's say, like the Bible
Right.
or whatever other text is like the bedrock of truth in that belief system.
So if someone's claiming divine inspiration, but their message goes against a specific passage in the Bible,
Exactly.
that's a big red flag.
Huge red flag. You got it. It's like saying, you shall know them by their fruits.
Okay.
But even before we get to the whole fruits thing, there's a
Yeah.
couple more red flags to watch out for.
Okay.
The second one that our sources pointed to was all about motives.
Oh.
A true prophet is all about serving something bigger than themselves, not building their own little empire.
Yeah.
So when we see someone using their platform mainly for personal gain, whether it's money, fame, even control over others,
Yeah.
that's a big warning sign.
So it's not just about what they're saying, it's why they might be saying it.
Exactly. Their intentions are key.
Okay.
And this kind of goes hand in hand with the third red flag, which is coercive tactics.
Okay.
So instead of encouraging people to think critically and develop a genuine faith, false prophets will often resort to fear manipulation, even pressure to keep their followers in line.
Right.
You even highlighted an example of this in one of the YouTube transcripts. Remember that speaker who said something like, "If you question my teachings, you're questioning God himself."
Oh, wow.
Classic manipulation.
That's kind of scary. It's like they're using people's desire to belong and be accepted.
Yeah, and it's a tactic that's been used for centuries. But now that we've got the theory down,
Right.
let's look at some real-world examples. And believe it or not, we don't have to look any further than the Bible.
Oh, okay.
Your sources brought up some interesting figures like Balaam, Hananiah, Simon the sorcerer, who all perfectly illustrate these red flags we're talking about.
Wow. Okay. So let's dive into these historical figures. What can we learn from their stories that can help us spot those same warning signs today?
Okay, well, let's start with Balaam.
Okay.
This is a guy who was asked by a king to curse the Israelites.
Right?
And even though God stepped in, Balaam still ended up giving advice that went against God's will because he was tempted by promises of wealth and power.
Oh.
So even though he's called a prophet, his desire for personal gain ultimately led him astray.
A classic example of red flag number 2 in action.
Exactly.
Okay, what about Hananiah?
So Hananiah is an interesting one because he made prophecies that directly contradicted what God had said.
Oh, wow.
He told the Israelites that their captivity would end soon and encouraged them to rebel, when in reality God had other plans.
Oh, no.
And this led to more suffering for the people he was claiming to help.
So it's a good reminder that just because someone says they're speaking for something bigger than themselves,
Right.
that doesn't mean they actually are. And there can be serious consequences to just blindly following someone without questioning what they're saying or why they're saying it.
Exactly. And that brings us to Simon the sorcerer.
Yeah.
And this is where things get interesting, because this guy was performing what appeared to be miracles. He even tried to buy the ability to perform even more miracles from the apostles.
Oh, my gosh.
Talk about a hunger for power and recognition.
That is like the definition of self-serving motives.
Right. It's almost comical if it weren't so concerning, but it shows how easily we can be tricked by outward appearances and impressive displays. These stories from thousands of years ago are still relevant today because the tactics haven't really changed all that much, have they?
Yeah, it's like they're all working from the same playbook.
Exactly.
It's kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah.
They're using the same tricks just with a modern twist. But that brings up a good point. Like,
Right.
knowing what to look for is one thing, but how do we actually use that knowledge in our lives? You know, especially today when we're bombarded with information and influencers everywhere.
Yeah, it can definitely feel overwhelming, but the sources you shared actually offer some good advice. They all emphasize the importance of individual discernment.
Okay.
It really comes down to this. Don't just believe everything you hear.
Makes sense.
We're encouraged to really test the spirits,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Look beyond what's on the surface, and most importantly, look at someone's fruits.
Fruits. Okay, now that's a metaphor I can get behind.
Yeah.
It's definitely more appealing than, like, confronting a potential false prophet head on.
Exactly. It's about paying attention to the impact someone's teachings have on their own life and the lives of those around them.
Right.
Are they promoting love and kindness and actual spiritual growth? Or is there a pattern of brokenness and division and manipulation?
Yeah, you even mentioned a few examples in your notes, like that leader who talked about unity all the time,
Right.
but then created this environment of fear and silence in their community.
Right. It's really sad to see because they're basically using spirituality to mask their own issues and need for control.
And that's why testing the spirits, like you said, is so important. It's about actually thinking critically, asking the tough questions,
Yeah.
and comparing what we're hearing with what we already know is true.
Exactly. It's about looking beyond the charisma and the promises and even the miracles and just asking, what's the real impact of this person's message?
Because blind faith, while it might sound nice, can have some really bad consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
We have a responsibility to ourselves and to other people to be discerning, to not just accept something as truth because it sounds good or makes us feel good in the moment.
I agree. So let's say you've spotted someone who seems to be checking all the wrong boxes, contradictions, self-serving motives, coercive tactics, bad fruit, the whole shebang.
Right, the whole 9 yards.
What do? Do you call them out publicly, stage some kind of intervention? What's the best course of action in that situation?
That's a tough one. And I'm sure a lot of people listening have probably been in that situation. It's like, what do you do? Thankfully, the sources we've been looking at offer some guidance here, too.
Okay.
They emphasize approaching these situations with wisdom and grace,
Okay.
focusing more on restoring the relationship than condemning the person.
That sounds a lot better than like publicly shaming them or something.
Right. It involves addressing the concerns directly, but doing it respectfully. And having a conversation if that's possible.
Yeah.
And always being truthful, but also compassionate.
Yeah. That's definitely easier said than done, especially when you're dealing with someone who might be really charismatic or even manipulative.
Exactly. And sometimes the best thing to do is just step away,
Right.
disengage from the situation or the person entirely.
Hmm.
As much as we might want to help or change their mind, we have to protect our own well-being too.
Yeah, it's like they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Exactly. Each person is ultimately responsible for their own spiritual journey.
Mm.
We can offer support and guidance, share our concerns,
Right.
but we can't force anyone to change.
It's about finding that balance, speaking the truth, offering compassion, and knowing when it's time to walk away.
It's a good reminder that everyone's on their own path, and those paths aren't always easy or straightforward.
Right.
But you know what? While we've been talking about spotting false prophets outside of ourselves,
Right.
it makes me think about something else. What about the deceptive voices that can pop up in our own heads?
That is so important. And it's something you even mentioned in your notes.
Right?
It's easy to focus on the external stuff, but we can actually become our own worst enemies when we let fear and doubt and those limiting beliefs hold us back.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
like that saying, we are our own harshest critics.
Right.
We internalize all those negative messages we've heard throughout our lives,
Hmm.
and they can really mess with our judgment, especially when it comes to faith and spirituality.
Absolutely. And these internal false prophets, they can be even trickier because they sound like our own thoughts.
Mhm.
They're like disguised as our own insecurities.
Yeah.
That's why self-awareness is so important in all of this. We need to be able to recognize those biases and thought patterns that might be leading us astray.
It's like we need to apply those same red flags to ourselves.
Exactly.
Are my thoughts and beliefs making me a more loving and kind person? Are they helping me grow and connect with others? Or are they keeping me stuck in this place of fear and doubt?
It's about questioning those stories we tell ourselves, challenging our own assumptions, and being willing to let go of beliefs that aren't serving us anymore.
Even if we've had those beliefs for a long time.
Even then. So really, this whole deep dive into false prophets, it's about learning how to be discerning in all areas of our lives, not just when it comes to other people, but also within ourselves.
I love that. It's about developing that discerning mind, a heart that's rooted in truth.
Yes.
and a spirit that's always open to learning and growing, even if it means questioning everything we thought we knew.
Beautifully said.